Thank you for joining me for this episode. Today, we're joined by Dr. Caitlin Morrison, and we're going to be speaking about the differences between conventional scan and impression based scleral lenses on the OI show. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I'm excited to be here with Dr. Caitlin Morrison, and we have had another chat about a year and a half ago, about her practice, and it is an absolute honor to get to speak with you. Tell me how your practice is doing.
My gosh, thank you, David. It's a honor to be back on. I love being on your podcast. My practice is doing great. We're in year 4 now, which is wild, and I feel like I'm way too young and hip to have a 4-year-old practice. But it's been doing really well. We have had lots of interesting patients. We're really gaining some traction on a lot of interesting areas of specialty contact lenses that I didn't think we were going to be so popular in. But a lot of
Uh-huh.
people are like occlusive contact lenses, prosthetics, light sensitivity lenses, just interesting, really interesting stuff. And we're just having a good time with our patients. So everything's been going really
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I guess it was a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. I guess my podcast is older than I thought too. So it's amazing how time flies. Um, I wanted to have you break down some things for us. And, having done scleral lenses since 2004, we've come a long ways. You and I have talked about that. Um, but there's a world of scleral lenses that have really evolved over the years. And now I feel like we have different types of scleral lenses that are almost segmented and broken up into different categories. And in observing your social media and observing you and knowing about your practice, I think you do a pretty good job of segmenting and knowing how and where to fit these different types of contact lenses, scleral lenses particularly. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that. When you're seeing patients, how do you categorize them? And then maybe I'll ask you some more questions and we'll dig into them.
Yeah, definitely. So, when a person comes in for a consult at my office, we talk to them, and they're a candidate for scleral lenses. And we'll talk to them about 3 different categories. And the 3 different categories of sclerals are conventional scleral lenses, scan designed scleral lenses, and impression or mold designed scleral lenses. And this is just the way that the contact lens is made. So, the way that you obtain the data in order to make a scleral.
Right.
So conventional sclerals, I say to them, the patient, the manufacturer creates a design, and that design can be really anything that they think of. It's a brainchild of the manufacturing company. And you get this lens and you can make modifications to it as you see fit. And you are limited and can do whatever the manufacturer says that you can do with that lens. So we have lots of different amazing companies that are creating and throwing a ton of money and research into all of these different lens designs. And we have a lot of things that we can do with them now. And so if you're going to a person, or if you have like fit sclerals in your office, you're probably fitting a conventional scleral lens design. And then the I tell patients, like, that's like the baseline that fits most people. That's what most people are able to be fit in. I actually fit them at their initial exam in that lens so that they can see what it feels like, approximately what it'll look like on the patient. And then I
And
will.
that lens is the lens that's been around for a while, right? You were just talking when you first came into this, and in 2004, when we first came in, it was like the first lens. It was the Jupiter lens, and it was the first one. And then working with my laboratory, they've now been on their fifth iteration of their first scleral lens, and all along the way we dealt with peripheral curves, we talked about reverse geometry, and now we've kind of edited, and now many of the designs, not all of them, have some toricity to them. And can you speak to that, like explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, over the years, the data and studies have just been showing us that the majority of patients have toricity in their sclera, as well as their, if they have toricity in the cornea, that's one thing, but a completely separate thing is if they have toricity in their sclera, and they're not really that related. So
Mm-hmm.
the majority of people actually have pretty asymmetric scleral shapes. And overall, people have some sort of toricity. So originally, when I was fitting them, we were starting off with a spherical landing zone design. And what people would get the most with this were that 3 and 9 bearing on the cornea, where the lens is really, really tight, right at the 3 and 9 markings, and
Yeah.
then we get a lot of fogging. And so throughout the years, because we have now these lenses where you can put the toricity in the landing zone, we actually start out with that lens. I mean, I think almost everybody nowadays has a fitting set that has toric peripheral curves, and we just start with that lens right off the bat because we know that's what's going to minimize the fogging, minimize the debris for the patient, increase the comfort, and just really overall give a better fit.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most of the fitting sets from the different laboratories have have as the primary now a toricity type of lens. But one of the things I've observed on a lot of patients is that set periphery toricity that's on there. I mean, it's not always equal, right? We know that with astigmatism, that the superior cornea isn't always the same as the inferior cornea, and we see little amounts of that, and that can be problematic from a comfort or from a fogging issue.
Mhm.
So where do you go when you see that happen? Like, what is it about that drives you to do something different, and what do you do different?
Yeah, so really I feel like I like to take a whole body approach to the patient, meaning that when they first come in, we talk about everything. We talk about what lenses have you been in before? Have you tried sclerals? How many revisions did you make? What are the things that are working? What's the things that are not working? Did you try GPs, hybrids? Did you try any of these other lenses? Um, just are they easy to take off, hard to take off? And then we go through like goals. What were your goals be, et cetera, et cetera? Have you had any surgeries? Surgeries is a huge one for particularly bumping up those patients into kind of a more advanced technology or more advanced designs, because a lot of those patients who have those areas where you have very irregular conjunctiva, a lot of those patients have had surgeries like retinal surgeries, and the retinal surgery will produce or strabismus surgery will produce a very irregular sclera. And that can make it very hard to fit a conventional scleral lens because you'll get this one area that fits, like you were saying, superiorly amazing. And then inferior, you have pooling, you have debris, you have like, or it's really tight or something like this. So in those cases, at the end of the exam, after I've fit the patient with a conventional lens and we look at it together. Like I look at it, they see how it feels. I tell them, this isn't your lens, but it's kind of close-ish to where it would be. But here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing you have scarring from your retinal surgery. I'm seeing you have large pinguiculas. I'm seeing that this just overall, even though this is a great lens, this is not a good fit. And I know that I can make it work, but you're going to get a better result if you move to a higher technology lens. I can do whatever you want within the confines of your budget. So if you want to stick with a scleral lens that's slightly more affordable, I can do that for you, but we know the limitations of each technological advance. And so just to tell everyone about every single technology that there is out there. And I do I do say to patients as well, you do have the technology available for you. I think you'd be fine with the conventional regular scleral lens. I think you would do very well with that. I think you could save a little money here. If you want these really advanced designs, like that is totally available to you. If you just want to have like that level of technology, you don't necessarily need it, but if you want it, it's there for you. And a lot
Mhm.
of people do. Yeah. Go
So
ahead.
since you're fitting these people into a lens,
Hmm.
I'm sure you do that right after a refraction of an eye exam, right? You cram
Hmm.
all of that into one appointment, right?
Hmm.
Is that what you do?
Yep.
Probably not something where most people do an eye exam and then put a lens on and for everybody, right? There's it's not a lot of time for that. What do you suggest most people do if they, are doing an eye exam on a patient and they get somebody like that?
Yeah. So if somebody is a candidate in a very busy practice for scleral lenses, I would have them for come back for scans, fitting of a lens, over refraction of that lens, and just see how it is and see what you can do on a separate visit. And if you have a amazing staff who can put on a lens for you and analyze that lens and just make sure, okay, does it look okay? Does it not touching the cornea? I put on the lens that maybe the fitting guide suggests for this patient. Then you can just go into the office, look at the lenses, make some notes on them, and then if they look good, you can just go and order them as long as the patient is happy with, kind of how they're feeling, they're okay with putting them in and out, etc. But yeah, I mean, it's a little different with my practice because I do get to spend an hour and a half for that initial consult, and that is very unrealistic for most of the most very, very busy practices. So yeah, I would have them come back for sure.
Yeah, the conventional lenses is where, I think most people, like you said, are fitting, and I think even those lenses, they need to be at a separate visit, and that's where you bring it back so that you can spend the time with them. If you've got a super tech who can do all of that, that may be something you can do at the end of an exam, but most people, I would say, are better suited to do that in another appointment. Otherwise, you're going to be skipping steps,
Mhm.
or you're going to get way behind, and then you're not going to like scleral lenses, right?
Mhm.
So explain a little bit about these higher this next level, this scan, and then the impression based. Like, what are some of the things that are the advantages? You mentioned a little bit, but some of the advantages of those lenses over the conventional, just kind of restate that.
Yeah, definitely. So the scan design scleral lenses use a machine that scans the cornea and the sclera called scleral profilometry. And it basically puts this design into a CAD software program. And then you actually get to go into the program, or some programs, they just design it for you. It just depends on what machine you have. But you get to go into this program, you map out the limbus, you take all of the clearances, you make the clearances, you put the prescription in, you can bump it out depending on if there's like little bumps in the sclera. And then the design on the landing zone and the optic zone are going to be very different. So if you have a large pinguecula or say something like that, the plastic itself is just going to ride over the pinguecula instead of cut through it, where you have to then elevate it or make a physical microvault or a notch. And that can be really helpful. I mean, it's just so much faster to the end result because we know that like microvaults and notching is good. I'd say microvault's probably a little better than notching, but that's really great. But it takes time, and especially to like get the lens back and make sure that it fits well and it's not doesn't have any seepage. And then the impression based designs are where you physically take a mold of the eye with an impression material and you put it in a little cup, take a mold of the eye, take it out. You scan up that mold design into a software program. Again, you look at the software program, or the manufacturer does, and says, okay, does this look pretty good? And then I can specify different things to the lab for, like, I want it to look like this, I want it to have fenestrations, all these different things. So when you get up into these higher lenses, you just have a slightly better fit around the conjunctiva. So if someone's really having difficulty with a really tight lens that's loose in other areas and the conjunctiva is obviously irregular, or if they have really large pingueculas, if they have scarring from surgery, that can definitely be a patient that's better suited to one of those lenses, because you're going to get to the end result a lot faster. And the two things that I always see in my practice are lenses too tight, and coming from a conventional lens and wanting to move into something else, is lens is too tight or fogging. A lot of patients have fogging issues. And then the practitioner's done a really good job. Like, they've done a great job fitting them. The lens looks good, but you can't do everything with the one technology. You just can't. And so that's where, you can get this better result. So those are the patients that I would usually use it for. There's a couple interesting things that I've found over the years that have been really beneficial. So patients with really old corneal transplants, or patients with a lot of suction who have post LASIK or post RK, something about the way that the scleral lens lands on a post RK or post LASIK eye, I think it's because the central cornea is so flat and then the mid periphery is higher. And I feel like that makes the lens suction more. And so you get like a suction quality with those patients that, don't necessarily get with other patients. And especially like really large keratoconic patients, if you've gotten a lot of suction with those patients, with these higher level designs, you can put some fenestrations in the landing zone or the optic zone to induce more oxygen, to break the suction. Some conventional lenses can do it as well. You just have to specify where you'd want the fenestrations made because they make them by hand. So
Where do you usually put the fenestrations?
I have been ordering every RK patient of mine gets fenestrations in the landing zone at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say exactly how far they are from the edge, but they're like, I don't know, maybe like a millimeter in, 0.5 millimeters in. They're pretty close to the edge, but right in the landing zone, just depending on. But I love using those. So
yeah. So, one of the big hurdles behind doing these types of lenses is the cost. And so one thing I heard you say several times is that by going to a scan-based approach, or in a really complicated case, possibly an impression-based, that you're going to get to the end sooner. And we all have experienced in conventional lenses that it might take 2 or 3, maybe 4 lenses in some cases, which I think is laughable because for sclerals, I was regularly ordering 5 or 6 lenses in the corneal lenses. Mm-hmm. And then sclerals came in and it really solved a lot of those problems. But the scan and impression based, I think we all would agree, and maybe you can confirm that we're going to get there sooner. Would you be open? I don't know that I've seen a study on this, but would you be open to guessing, on average, the number of lenses that it might take in a scan based versus a conventional based to get to a final lens?
Okay, so
I'm waiting for this like 1.7 lenses or something like that.
I actually think that John Gellis did do this in his clinic at the Cornea and contact
something like that. He did something, but I don't know. He
did
published a white paper on it.
I think he did it was like 2.3, something like that. But the caveat is that John is very similar to I am in my practice, is that we don't see like the patient that would be getting fit with their first scleral ever. I mean, we do see a lot of those patients, but we're getting a lot of I've been fit in these 4 different eye print
after,
so it's hard. But I would say maybe you're getting to the end result faster, but I wouldn't say that you go through fewer remakes. And here's why. At least in my practice, is because the patients that you're going to be putting into these lenses are harder, period. And so if you were to put them in a conventional, you'd maybe do 4 or 5 revisions, maybe 3 revisions, 4 revisions. You put them into a scanner mold based lens, you're still making revisions on that lens. Maybe, you're probably making like 1 to 2 revisions. So you're making less revisions because it's a higher lens, but like a patient that's easier is still maybe getting a revision or 2 in a regular conventional lens, whereas these tougher patients are still getting the revisions, but you're just in a different lens, so it's faster for them particularly.
Yeah.
So I would say I still average, David, and this will make your listeners feel better. I still average like the initial lens and 2 remakes. Usually I do the initial and 1 remake, and that's like a given because I usually change something. And then for my patients, because they happen to be a little bit more difficult, I usually use that second revision just to like do a little tweak here or there, like a little something,
Yeah. I think that's that's very fair that we all get to it and end with 1, maybe 2, but then there's always that third that maybe to fine tune things should we need it. And I think the other thing about the scan and the impression based is that the outcome that you get at 3 fits is better than the outcome you get at your third with the conventional, because it just fits better.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And the vision can be slightly sharper. And I found that in my practice for sure. And I didn't really think that I was going to see it too often, but because the lenses fit more, they fit better. The optics are able to be more central because most lenses decenter inferior temporally. That's just the way that eyes are. And everybody who's listening will be like, oh yeah, mine do that too. And you get the closest area superior nasally, and that's pretty much how all conventional lenses are, unless the patient is like an amazing patient with a amazing eyeball, but most do decenter a little bit. And then you get the optics that are decentered. And so for most patients going from 2400 to 2025, 2020, they don't care. I mean, it's great vision. It's amazing. I'm wearing conventional sclerals right now and my vision's perfect. I don't have anything going on with my eyes, but they're perfect vision. But if you get those same patients, I've taken a lot of those patients out of those lenses and put them into a scan or impression based lens, and their vision actually does get better, both subjectively and objectively. I would say I've seen like 1 to 2 lines of difference and getting a little bit sharper. I actually just had a really interesting patient, if you don't mind me sharing this story, who he is a police officer, and he is a police officer right now because he used to be a commercial pilot, but he was grounded because his vision wasn't good. He has keratoconus. And so I said, with the conventional lenses in the office, I fit him and he was able to be 20/25 plus in the right and 20/20 in the left eye. I said, you're not that, you're great. You have great eyes. But if we wanted to get a little bit closer, maybe we just do that impression-based lens just to see if it would work. And I had him in for the dispensing a couple of weeks ago, and we got 20/15 vision in each eye.
Hey,
So now he can go back to flying. So
there you go.
yeah, I was really happy about
That's
that.
awesome.
I mean, it wasn't me; it was the it's the technology.
I am a big fan of the jockey. The horse is only so good, but I think the jockey, I think it's important that the jockey is there.
Mhm,
Okay, so now let's talk about costs.
mhm.
And there's an added cost for the practice to go to a scan based, and that usually involves a purchase of a capital piece of equipment.
Mhm.
But then with regards to a conventional, to a scan, to an impression, can you give an idea of like a percentage increase that each of those might be? It's going to be different lab to lab. But do you have just kind of, do you know, is there a general, like it's usually 20, 30, $40, or a 20% increase, or, a
Yeah,
10%? Do you have an idea on the percentage increase?
yeah, basically double. So
Mm-hmm.
each time the lens costs double. So
Yeah. So if I take a conventional lens, it's going to double in cost to get to a scan based.
mm.
And then that scan based is going to double to be an impression base.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I mean,
fairly close in what I've observed.
give or
Is that?
take. Yeah, give or take for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Again, it's most companies now, I would say, are pretty similar in how they're pricing everything. And so yeah, I would say that's approximately so. And if somebody's thinking, okay, is my practice, what's the ROI on bringing in one of these pieces of equipment? I would say that if you have, it depends on the complexity of your patients, and their willingness to get that higher level technology. So, kind of, I would say, look at the area that you're in. Are your patients, do you have a large patient population that uses scleral lenses? Do you have a large patient population that's interested in sclerals? Do you have patients that, if they were offered with the higher technology, would want it, would prefer it? Because I have to say, even though I have patients that would do very well in conventionals, most, like 70% of them, do choose to go with the higher level, maybe 80% at this point,
Mhm.
just because that's just what they want in my practice. And I just got the wavefront aberrometry to add
The
to add that
obits.
wavefront.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I just got that in my practice. I haven't set it up yet because I need someone to help me. But yeah, I just got that, and that should be really incredible. And I wasn't going to get it for a while because I was like, yeah, the ROI is like, I don't really see that many patients that I think would need it. But then I
Hmm.
was talking to my friend John Gellis, and he was like, you should get it. And he gave me some reasons why. And the reasons for me were like okay, that would be good. And for me, it was like patient education. Like, yes, it costs money to have that machine. Am I going to be doing a lot of wavefront technology lenses? Maybe, maybe not. But the valuable information of telling my patient, like, this is how much aberrometry or higher order aberrations we're getting rid of, that's worth it for me. And you can do really cool things with multifocals and decenter the optics. And those results, I think, would be worth it for my patients, regardless. So it wasn't more of like making a profit off of that kind of machine for me. It was like, that's actually beneficial to my patients and it's worth it, even if I don't make a profit off that machine. So
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, if people are thinking about, okay, what to bring in, think of like, what what do you know that your patients would want and need, and kind of do that next level and just see if it takes off. Because I only put the impression based design lens in my office in 2021. I thought I was rarely going to use it because I thought, I wasn't really, I don't know, I was like, oh, not that many people will probably even want it because I had everything
Hmm.
else, and people are obsessed with it. It's my most popular lens. So it's like, it's crazy. So yeah, I would say just maybe start one thing at a time. And some pieces of equipment you can also lease and just see like how it does for you. And if you don't really end up using it, you can give it back. But patients love technology, and if it can get them closer to a good result, then that'd be great. But if you only have one scleral lens patient a month, it's not really worth it. But if you're getting really
Right.
busy, if you build it, you could have a base that's quite large. So
Yeah. Yeah, and the word gets out, right? You start fitting patients, and you even are in a small town. There's enough people in that small town that would value that added benefit, even if they're not irregular corneal patients. We're starting to see far more patients who've got a diopter 2, 3, 4 of cylinder and just get better vision with the scleral lens. People, and those are likely in the conventional lens that fit really well. And then you get known in the area as being somebody who does these tough fits, and then you're driven for that one patient or those two patients that you think of to go into impression or a scan base, and then it kind of grows. Well,
and
that's awesome.
yeah, for example, just a little quick like story that's kind of cool is that I got the aberrometer for one patient, and because I thought it would be so cool. So this is a guy who has had double vision for a long time. He was interested in having contact lenses that corrected his double vision. So he had so much prism. You can really only do this with the impression based lens. So I got him the impression based lens with prism, and he wanted multifocal. So he wanted everything in one lens and like not to have to wear glasses. And I obviously talked to him about like this is a lot of things for the lens to do, realistic expectations, obviously. However, I was like, wow, if I could do this machine over the scleral lens and figure out like if I moved the optics 2 millimeters this direction, then for the multifocal, then I would just really dial it in. I was like, that's my guy. That's the guy that I want this machine for. And so I'm really excited to do that with him. And like I dispensed the lenses for distance the other day and they're working perfectly. So I hope that I can just add on the multifocal and it'll be incredible. So yeah, you're really motivated once you get these patients, and
Yeah.
more people find out, definitely they'll
Yeah,
keep coming.
that's awesome.
Hmm.
Well, I appreciate your perspective on all of this. Obviously, you are in this world and you've been doing this for a long time, very successfully in your own practice now, which is really cool to hear. And great stories. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Thank you for hanging out with me on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, of course. And thanks so much for having me. And I love talking to you, and I love, talking about sclerals. And if anyone has a question for me, obviously you can reach out.
All right. Well, awesome. We'll put information on how to reach out to Dr. Morrison in the show notes. And thank you for joining us for this episode. Make sure to like and subscribe, and please share this podcast with a friend and let them know about the OI show. Thank you.